Man is fired for giving food to hungry child. 1 hour later, billionaire owner discovers the reason. Imagine a simple scene, a neighborhood market, full shelves, people coming and going. And, in the middle of it, a small, almost invisible gesture. An employee hands out a sandwich to a thin, lost-looking child. This gesture, which seemed only human, would become the beginning of something much bigger, something that no one in that city could have foreseen. Leave your like and subscribe to follow this story until the end. The morning in Springfield, Illinois, seemed like any other. Harper's Market, one of the largest in the city, opened its doors at 7 o'clock. The shelves were tidy, the smell of fresh bread spread through the bakery aisle, and customers began to enter, each with their own hurries and worries. Among the employees was Michael Turner, a 39-year-old man known to his colleagues as calm, dedicated, and always willing to help. Michael had worked for more than 6 years in the food replacement industry. I had never been absent. I had never been late. He was not an ambitious man. He just wanted stability to pay the rent, support his wife, Laura, and 8-year-old daughter, Emily. That morning, however, something happened that would change everything. While arranging some cans on the shelf near the exit, Michael noticed a child standing next to the automatic door. The boy looked to be about 9 years old. He had old clothes, a t-shirt that was too loose, and he held his stomach as if the pain came from within. His eyes ran across the shelves as if they were looking for something, but without the courage to enter. Michael watched him for a few minutes. He saw when the child approached an abandoned cart and looked inside, as if expecting to find leftover food. Michael's heart tightened. He knew what it was: hunger. Without thinking twice, he put down the box of cans he was carrying and walked to the bakery in the market. He took a simple sandwich of turkey and cheese, wrapped in paper. She passed by the cashier discreetly, but did not register the item. She did not want to expose the child or create an embarrassment. He went back to the door and handed over the snack. "Take it, boy. Eat that," he said in a low voice. The child widened his eyes, hesitated for a moment, but then held the sandwich tightly and began to eat in a hurry, as if he was afraid that someone would take it from his hands. Michael stood there, silently, feeling a lump in his throat. But he was not alone. Across the aisle, Paul Simmons, the supermarket manager, was watching everything. Paul was known for his rigidity. For him, rules were rules. Nothing justified the diversion of goods. He approached with firm steps and a hard expression. "Turner, in my office." "Now," he said, his voice low but cutting. Michael tried to explain, but Paul didn't want to listen in the hallway. They took the conversation to the administrative room, where the tension quickly accumulated. "You know what the company's policy is. No employee can pick up goods without registration." "This is theft," Paul said coldly, without even looking Michael in the eye. "It was just a sandwich. The boy was starving. Haven't you seen it?" "He had nothing, Paul. Nothing," Michael replied, no longer able to hide his indignation. "It doesn't matter. You took a product without paying. This is a direct violation of the rules." I am registering his immediate resignation. The silence that followed was heavy. Michael couldn't believe what he heard. 6 years of work, effort, sleepless nights, everything collapsed because of a human gesture. He tried to argue again, but Paul had already filled out the termination form. Michael walked out of the market empty-handed, out of uniform, feeling the world weigh on his shoulders. The boy was still on the sidewalk, eating the last bits of the sandwich. When he saw Michael leave, he raised his head. The boy's eyes had a mixture of gratitude and fear, as if he knew that this man had risked something important for him. Michael only smiled slightly, but inside he was devastated. On the other side of town, in a mansion surrounded by old trees and iron gates, Jonathan Harper, the billionaire owner of the grocery chain, was eating his breakfast. At 63, Harper was respected but also criticized for his aloof stance. He managed his affairs with a steady hand, rarely getting involved in small details. For him, the important thing was the numbers, the reports, the graphs that indicated growth. But that morning, Harper would receive a call that would completely change his view of what had happened in one of his stores. The phone rang. It was Paul Simmons, the manager. Paul proudly recounted what he had done. fired an employee for stealing a sandwich and giving it to an unknown child. He expected, perhaps, a compliment for his rigidity. What happened next, however, was not what he expected. Harper asked for details. Who was the employee? Who was the child? What exactly had happened? Paul, not noticing the boss's cold and growing tone of curiosity, told him everything. It was at that moment that Harper felt something different, a restlessness that I had not felt for years. He hung up the phone without much comment, but was unable to continue breakfast. That story seemed to carry more weight than Paul imagined. Within an hour of Michael's firing, the billionaire decided to go out in person to investigate. And that's when everything started to change. Michael Turner walked the streets of Springfield, trying to process the humiliation he had just suffered. The morning sun lightly burned his face, but he didn't feel hot or cold. He only thought about his daughter, Emily, and his wife, Laura. He knew he would come home with devastating news. He no longer had a job, and the electricity bill would not wait. The rent would not wait. Arriving at his small apartment in the Maplewood neighborhood, Michael was greeted by the silence of the house. Laura was in the room, dressed for work, looking out the window. Emily was drawing in the living room, concentrating on her notebook. When Michael entered, the two immediately realized that something was wrong. What happened? Laura asked, her voice firm but full of concern. Michael sighed, trying to find the strength to explain. They fired me for a sandwich. Laura was silent, not fully understanding. Emily looked at her father with big, curious eyes. A sandwich? Dad, did you do something wrong? Emily asked innocently. Michael bent down and looked into his daughter's eyes. No, my love. I tried to help someone who needed it. The lump in his throat tightened. Laura walked up to him, holding his hands. Michael, you did the right thing. It doesn't matter what they say. Despite the words of comfort, Michael felt an overwhelming weight. He had never been fired. He had never felt wronged like this. The feeling of helplessness was almost physical. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Jonathan Harper couldn't get the story out of his head. He never personally engaged with smaller-scale situations in his stores, but there was something in the account that didn't feel right. An employee delivering food to a hungry child and being fired for it? Harper had plenty of experience in business and knew that cases like this could turn into image crises. But still, his instinct told him that there was something more. Harper decided he needed to see it for himself. He called his driver, Kevin, and asked to go immediately to Harper's Market on Maplewood Avenue, where Michael had been fired. When she arrived at the supermarket, Harper did not announce her presence. He walked in like any other customer, watching the movement with expert eyes. It was then that he saw Paul Simmons arguing with a customer at the checkout, trying to keep control of the situation. Harper stood behind a shelf, analyzing everything. And then, as if fate conspired, Harper saw a scene that made him stop. On the sidewalk, outside the store, was the child. He couldn't see her face completely, but he realized that she was holding something carefully, as if it was precious. Harper felt a tightness in her chest. Something about that scene felt familiar. He decided to intervene discreetly. He approached and asked the child, "Hey kid, is everything okay?" The child looked scared, but did not have time to answer. An employee outside, whom Harper recognized as Michael, approached. But not like before. Now, Michael was standing there, watching, still worried about the boy. "Mr. Harper?" said a voice behind him. Harper turned and saw Paul, surprised to recognize his own boss. Harper looked at the manager and then at Michael. Something inside it clicked. He asked to speak to Michael alone. "Michael Turner?" Harper asked, keeping calm, but with a piercing look. "Yes, Mr. Harper." Michael replied, cautiously, not understanding why the billionaire personally was interested in him. Harper asked a simple but direct question. "Why did you give this child food?" Michael swallowed. He expected rebuke, not sincere curiosity. He then told the story, from start to finish. The observation of the hungry boy, the sandwich taken from the store, the fear of being discovered by the manager, and the boy's reaction. Harper listened in absolute silence. With each detail, his expression changed, going from neutral to something deeper: surprise, compassion, and finally an uncanny determination. He didn't say anything right away. He only thanked Michael for his honesty. Meanwhile, Paul Simmons tried to explain himself, arguing about rules, company policies, legal risks. Harper raised his hand and interrupted. "We don't need to discuss that now, Paul," he said firmly, but without anger. "Michael, come with me. We need to talk about something important." Michael felt a mixture of relief and fear. He didn't know what to expect. Harper took him to the supermarket's management office, but not as an ordinary boss. There was something in the air, a seriousness that said, this conversation would change everything. On the way, Harper began to speak. "Michael, it's not often for me to get involved in situations like this, but there's something about what you've done that I can't ignore. I need you to tell me the truth, without omitting anything. Did you only help the child out of compassion, or was there something more?" Michael was surprised. He thought Harper was just a distant, cold billionaire. But now she saw that the man wanted to understand, really understand. "It was just compassion, Mr. Harper," Michael said firmly, looking into the master's eyes. "I just couldn't let that child go hungry." Harper remained silent for a few seconds, staring at the employee with intensity. Finally, he made a gesture and said, "Michael, I'm about to show you something. Something that will change how you see it all." Michael felt a shiver run down his spine. He didn't know what Harper wanted to show, but something told him that his life, which until now had been marked by routine and quiet effort, was about to turn upside down. Harper then pulled out her phone and called someone, without saying a word to Michael. A few minutes later, a person entered with a folder of documents. Harper opened the folder and began showing old photos, reports, and notes that made direct reference to the neighborhood, the store, and, surprisingly, the very child Michael had helped. "This child," Harper said, pointing to a picture, "is more important than you think. And what did you do for her? It will change the destiny of many here." Michael looked at Harper, not understanding yet. A mixture of confusion, anxiety, and curiosity washed over him. And so, without realizing it, he was about to enter the heart of a story that no one in Springfield could have imagined. Harper looked at Michael with serious, almost piercing eyes. He knew that what he was about to reveal would completely change the employee's perception of what had happened that morning. Michael felt his heart race. Something inside him said that this story wasn't just about a sandwich or a strict store policy. There was something bigger, something hidden for years. "Michael, this child," Harper began, pointing to the photo in the briefcase, "is Ethan Parker. He has lived in this neighborhood for years. But what you don't know is that Ethan went through difficult situations from a very young age. His mother, unfortunately, passed away recently, and his father is absent. He survived thanks to neighbors, a few schools and assistance programs. But no one, not even social services, could ensure that he had regular food." Michael felt a mixture of relief and sadness. He had felt pure empathy when he saw the child's hunger, but he did not imagine that the situation was so serious. "But that still doesn't explain why you're here with me," Michael said, trying to understand. Harper closed his briefcase and took a deep breath. "Because, Michael, you did something that few would have the courage to do. A simple gesture, but one that shows character, compassion, and courage. The moment you handed over that sandwich, without thinking about yourself, you proved something that not everyone can. That you can do the right thing even when all the signs say otherwise." Michael swallowed, unable to answer immediately. He was shocked. "I expected reprimand, maybe some kind of minimal compensation, but not something like that. Mr. Harper, I didn't do it thinking about receiving anything. I couldn't ignore the boy," Michael said, his voice breaking. "And that's exactly what matters. Michael," Harper continued, "you did what few would do. And so I want you to know that I will personally correct this injustice." Michael didn't know how to react. He thought maybe it was just motivational talk, something a billionaire would say on rare occasions. But Harper continued, "I want you to go back to work tomorrow. But not like before. I want you to be responsible for a new program that we are going to implement. A program to ensure that children in vulnerable situations have access to adequate food in our stores. And you will be the central person in this project." Michael blinked several times, trying to process. He had been fired for a human gesture, But now he was being asked to lead something that would directly impact the lives of other children. It was almost surreal. "Mr. Harper, I don't know what to say," Michael said, his voice trembling. "Tell him you'll take the challenge," Harper replied firmly. "Because, Michael, you showed that there is something that is not taught in schools or training. You have heart, and that's what we need." Meanwhile, Paul Simmons, who had been watching the conversation in silence, began to grasp the extent of what was happening. He had believed that firing Michael was an act of justice, applying rules to the letter, but now he saw that he had underestimated the importance of the official's gesture. Harper turned to him and said, "Paul, learn a lesson today. Rules are important, but humanity is essential. Without it, no business, no profit or policy is worth anything." Paul remained silent, looking at Michael with a mixture of admiration and regret. That afternoon, Michael received a call from Laura, who was at home with Emily. She had watched some local news and seen people commenting on the situation on the internet. A video, filmed by a supermarket customer, showed Michael handing the sandwich to the child. The video quickly went viral in the city. People began to send messages of support, compliments, and even proposals for help. "Michael, I can't believe it," Laura said emotionally. "Everyone's talking about you. You did something amazing." Michael smiled, feeling a mixture of shame and pride. He had never sought recognition, he just wanted to help. But now, his story was beginning to inspire others. Meanwhile, Harper began detailing the plan for the program. He wanted Michael to lead the implementation of an initiative in all of the chain's stores, a food distribution system for children in vulnerable situations, carefully identified and accompanied by social workers. The project had the potential to impact hundreds of children in Springfield and, in the future, in other cities. Michael realized the responsibility he was taking on. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, bureaucracies, and criticism. But for the first time in a long time, he felt that he could do something meaningful that could really change lives. However, the real surprise was yet to come. Harper, noticing Michael's genuine interest in helping, decided to reveal a detail that would completely change the employee's perception of the child and the whole situation. "Michael, there's something you need to know about Ethan Parker," Harper said, his voice low and serious. "He is, in fact, the grandson of one of my former partners. His family went through difficulties and, as a result, he was left without adequate supervision. You saved not only a hungry child, but someone who, in a way, represents a direct connection to the history of our company and my family." Michael was dumbfounded. He didn't expect anything like this. The simple act of compassion had intersected with family and business stories he would never have imagined. That sandwich, delivered on impulse and empathy, had much more weight than anyone could have imagined. Harper concluded, "So, Michael, I want you to know that your gesture will not be forgotten, and that from now on, you will have a fundamental role, not only in the company, but in the lives of many children." Michael felt tears form in his eyes. He never imagined that a simple act of kindness could lead to something so profound and transformative. As he left the supermarket office, he realized that his life had completely changed in a few hours. The dismissal, which seemed like an end, was actually just the beginning of something bigger. Over the next few days, Michael Turner began to become deeply involved in the project that Harper had proposed. He still couldn't believe that his life had changed so drastically in such a short time. What once seemed like a simple grocery job now turned into an opportunity to really impact lives. The program was called Food with Care and aimed to identify children in vulnerable situations in the vicinity of Harper's Market stores and ensure that they had access to nutritious and consistent meals. Michael went on to meet with social workers, teachers, and even volunteer doctors who would help monitor the children's well-being. On the first day of implementation, Michael went to the Maplewood store, now in charge of the program. He brought with him a team made up of social workers and store employees. His first task was to identify families who really needed help. He started with nearby schools, talking to principals and teachers who indicated children at risk. That's how he met Ethan Parker again. The child was still a little shy, but when she saw Michael, she smiled shyly. The boy remembered the sandwich, the simple, human gesture that had changed his day, and now it seemed that that gesture would change his whole life. "Hello, Ethan," Michael said, crouching down to be at the boy's height. "Remember me?" Ethan nodded, speechless. Michael's daughter Emily also showed up at the school that day to help, bringing some toys and books for the children. She quickly won the friendship of Ethan and other small beneficiaries of the program. The community quickly began to notice the initiative. Not everything was easy. Some officials, especially those who had grown accustomed to the rigidity and formality of the rules, viewed the program with suspicion. They thought it could lead to confusion, inventory problems, or criticism from corporate management. Michael began to face internal resistance, having to patiently explain the importance and human impact of the initiative. Meanwhile, Harper kept in constant but discreet contact. He wanted Michael to have autonomy, but he also provided support whenever needed. The billionaire was surprised by the employee's dedication and the way he handled challenges. One morning, while Michael was reviewing food distribution reports, he received an unexpected call. He was the principal of a school across town in Springfield Heights. "Mr. Turner, we have a complicated situation here," the director said. "There is a child who is constantly starving, but the parents do not cooperate with the school. We need help." Michael understood immediately. This was exactly the kind of case that the program had been created to solve. He scheduled a visit and went to the site in person. When he arrived, he found a girl named Sophia, only 7 years old, sitting alone in the schoolyard, with worn clothes and a sad look. Without hesitation, Michael handed her a meal and explained how she could receive help on a regular basis. The girl smiled, and Michael felt the same tightness in his chest that he had felt when helping Ethan for the first time. He knew that every child who received food, affection, and attention had a chance to grow up healthier and happier. But the program's impact began to expand beyond children. Parents, teachers, and even neighbors began to notice changes. Families who previously ignored nutrition problems started to get involved, looking for guidance, food tips, and emotional support. Michael realized that, despite initial resistance, the program was creating a network of care that went far beyond the supermarket. Meanwhile, Paul Simmons, the longtime manager who had fired Michael, began to follow the repercussions of the project. He watched with growing admiration and also a certain shame. He had believed that his decision had been just, but now he saw that he had made a mistake. Some employees began to comment on the difference between leaders who inspire and those who just follow rules. Paul began to reconsider his stance and even sought advice from Harper on how to handle human situations within the company. By the end of that first month, Michael had distributed hundreds of meals, served dozens of families, and begun a follow-up process to ensure the program was sustainable. He began documenting individual stories, such as Ethan and Sophia's, that showed how small gestures could generate great transformations. And it was at this point that an unexpected surprise arrived: an anonymous envelope, left at the entrance of Maplewood Supermarket. Inside, there was a handwritten letter and some old photos, showing Ethan in situations of extreme risk. The letter only said, "It wasn't just the sandwich that saved Ethan. He needed someone who would believe in him. Keep helping." Michael was surprised. The letter confirmed that he was making a difference, but it also sparked an even greater sense of responsibility. He realized that his mission was not just to distribute food, but to care for lives, to make sure that every child had a chance to be seen, to be cared for, to be protected. Meanwhile, Harper, following from a distance, realized that Michael not only led the program, but became a symbol of humanity within the supermarket chain. It was impressive to see how a simple act, a sandwich delivered out of compassion, had triggered such a significant transformation. But what no one yet knew was that the story was far from over. Behind the anonymous envelope, there was a connection to old events, family decisions, and secrets that could change everything in unexpected ways. The turning point was near, and Michael still had no idea how that seemingly simple human gesture would lead him to discover truths that many wanted to keep hidden. With the careful eating program in full swing, Michael Turner went on to become a household figure in Springfield. Parents and teachers called him by name. Children smiled when they saw him arrive with the food, and even customers of the supermarket began to comment on the initiative. It was a unique feeling, to feel that the daily work really mattered, that every gesture made a difference. But not everything was days of calm. While dealing with the logistics, distribution, and organization of the show, Michael began to notice subtle signs that something deeper was behind Ethan Parker's situation. Some of the families indicated by the schools seemed to hesitate. Others spoke of old situations involving the boy's family that Michael did not know. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, while reviewing old documents in the office of Maplewood's store, that Michael received an unexpected call from Harper. The billionaire's voice was serious. "Michael, I need you to come to my house today. There's something you need to see in person. It is urgent." Curious and apprehensive, Michael got in his car and headed to Harper's mansion, feeling a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Upon arriving, he was greeted by Harper in the entrance hall, without any formality. "Michael, thank you for coming so quickly." Harper led him to a private room, where there was a large table with photographs, files, and old documents. "I need you to pay attention carefully. What you will see may seem unexpected." Harper opened an old folder and started showing photos of events from the past decade, related to the company and, especially, the Parker family. Ethan, as a baby, appeared in some of these photos with his mother and a man who appeared to be his grandfather, whom Harper recognized immediately. "Michael, Ethan is the grandson of Richard Parker, my former partner," Harper explained. "Richard and I had been partners in the expansion of the supermarket chain for more than 20 years. There were disagreements, financial problems, and, above all, family issues that drove us apart. His daughter, Ethan's mother, sadly died without ever being able to regain custody of the child, and he ended up alone." Michael looked at the photos, taking in every detail. The connection Harper showed seemed almost impossible. Not only did he work at the supermarket that saved the child, but he was dealing with someone who had a direct link to the billionaire's own company and family history. "So, you're telling me that Ethan was at risk in an indirect way because of decisions that came from within my own business network?" Michael asked, incredulous. Harper nodded. "Exactly. And what you did, the gesture of compassion when you delivered a sandwich, didn't just save a hungry boy. You have broken a chain of neglect that could have continued." Michael felt the weight of responsibility like never before. Everything that had happened in the last week, all the repercussions, all the recognition, now took on a completely different dimension. He had become a key player in a story that had involved families, businesses, and secrets for decades. "Michael, I need you to continue leading the show. But there is something more." Harper removed some additional documents from the briefcase. Some files show that there were previous attempts to put Ethan under supervision, but due to administrative errors and old decisions, no one could guarantee that he had stability. "You, without realizing it, corrected this." Michael remained silent, absorbing every word. The feeling that everything was connected, that his simple action had unleashed something greater, impressed him. He thought again of the child, of the sandwich delivered on the sidewalk, and realized that kindness, even in a small gesture, had the power to change lives. Harper continued, "I want you to know, Michael, that the show you're leading now isn't just about food. It's about making sure kids like Ethan have care, attention, and protection. And you're the right person to make it happen." Upon leaving the mansion, Michael felt a mixture of pride and responsibility. He knew he couldn't fail. Ethan and other children depended on it, and now there was also a personal connection that he needed to honor. Over the next few days, Michael began to investigate more about Ethan's past, talking to neighbors, teachers, and former classmates of the boy's mother. She discovered stories of abandonment, financial difficulties, and business decisions that, unintentionally, had harmed the family. Each story reinforced her resolve. She couldn't just deliver food. She needed to build safety, trust, and support. Meanwhile, Harper kept a discreet observation, verifying the results of the program and offering financial and logistical support when needed. He began to realize that Michael was not only an exemplary employee, but a born leader, capable of inspiring others and turning a simple initiative into something meaningful. What Michael didn't know yet was that, behind the Parker family's old stories, there were elements that could create tension within the company itself. Old documents showed that controversial financial decisions, inheritance disputes, and business secrets could be revealed, impacting not only Ethan, but the entire Harper's Market chain. The city of Springfield was still oblivious to what was about to emerge. Michael continued to distribute food, help families, and strengthen the program, but not realizing that every step he took also brought everyone closer to an unexpected turn of events, one that would test not only his courage, but also his faith in justice, humanity, and human connections that no one imagined. The Food with Care program continued to grow, and Michael Turner was increasingly immersed in the routine of organizing, distributing, and monitoring the benefited children. But as the initiative gained recognition in the city, signs of internal resistance began to emerge within the company itself. Some old employees, accustomed to following rules to the letter without question, saw the program as a complication. They complained about the logistics, the bureaucracy, and the time spent. Some even went so far as to publicly question whether Michael wasn't overreacting in his attention to children. Michael tried to ignore the criticism, focusing on the larger mission. He knew he couldn't let himself be shaken, but the atmosphere inside some stores was starting to get tense. Paul Simmons, who had previously been rigid and inflexible, began to approach discreetly, watching as Michael dealt with challenges. He was torn between respect for the employee and the fear that the initiative would create problems for management. Meanwhile, Harper continued to follow closely, but discreetly. He knew that the reaction of some employees was natural, but also that Michael needed to learn to deal with resistance. Most importantly, Harper realized that there was something in Ethan Parker's past that needed to be cleared up before the story got even more complicated. One day, Michael received a call from the company's legal department. An alert had arrived about old documents that could affect the Harper's Market chain, related to the Parker family. Financial documents, contracts, and past correspondence indicated unresolved disputes between Richard Parker, Ethan's grandfather, and other partners, including Harper. "Michael, we need you to come to the central office," the lawyer's voice said. "It's not an emergency, but there is information you need to know to better understand the boy's situation." Upon arriving at the central office, Michael was greeted by Linda Reynolds, a lawyer for the company, who began to explain the details. She showed old contracts, records of financial disputes, and court decisions that affected the Parker family. Some of these decisions, made decades ago, had left Ethan vulnerable. "Michael, what you did to Ethan was more important than you think," Linda said, as she showed the documents. "You have interrupted a cycle of neglect that might otherwise have continued. But we need to be prepared. The exposure of this story can generate internal and external questions." Michael absorbed every detail. He understood that his initial gesture, a simple sandwich, had interrupted something that even the company could not fully control. Now, he needed to balance the human impact of the program with the complexity of the legal and family issues that arose. Meanwhile, Harper received detailed reports on the show's backlash. The local media had already begun to cover stories about benefited children, praise for the initiative, and reports of transformed families. But Harper knew that the big twist was yet to come. He watched intently, waiting for the right moment to reveal the full truth about Ethan and his connection to the company itself. Michael, despite the new discoveries, remained focused on children. He began organizing weekly meetings with social workers, teachers, and volunteers, reinforcing the importance of ongoing care. He also began preparing impact reports, showing how each meal distributed changed a child's life. However, small internal tensions began to manifest themselves more evidently. Some managers questioned Michael's decisions, claiming that the program consumed too many resources. Other employees spread rumors about favoritism or supposed preferences for certain children. Michael realized that he would need to not only deal with the logistics of the program, but also with the company's internal politics. In parallel, Harper decided it was time for Michael to know more about Ethan's full story. He arranged a private meeting at the central office, showing detailed Parker family files, old photos, correspondence, and legal records. Michael realized that the child he had helped was part of a more complex story, involving family disputes and past business decisions. "Michael," Harper said, his voice firm, "you're about to know what really connects Ethan to our company and our family history. It is important that you understand this before any public exposure." Michael felt a chill down his spine. He knew the turning point was near, but he still didn't fully grasp the scale of what he was about to discover. As he left the meeting, he reflected on how a simple gesture, a sandwich delivered out of compassion, had set off a series of events that would change not only Ethan's life, but also the perception of the company, the community, and possibly the Harper family itself. And without realizing it, Michael was about to enter the critical point of history, the moment when all connections would be revealed, where every secret of the past would meet the gestures of the present, and where he would discover that his courage had an impact far greater than anyone could have imagined. The day when Michael Turner would finally find out the whole truth came unexpectedly. Harper set up a meeting at his mansion, this time not only with Michael, but also with some trusted advisors and company lawyers. Michael felt a mixture of anxiety and curiosity. Something said that he was about to see the full dimension of what he had done, of the impact of his initial gesture. Harper began the meeting by showing old photographs and documents dating back more than 20 years. There were photos of Richard Parker, Ethan's grandfather, standing next to Harper at corporate events, business meetings, and family photos at private parties. One detail caught Michael's attention. Several of these photos included a young woman holding a baby, who Michael immediately recognized. It was Ethan's mother. "Michael," Harper began, his voice deep and firm, "what you did for Ethan was more than just feeding a hungry child. You have restored something that was lost years ago." Michael frowned, confused. "What do you mean, Mr. Harper?" Harper took a deep breath. "Ethan is the grandson of Richard Parker, my former partner. There were business disputes, yes, but also family ones. When Ethan's mother passed away, he was left under irregular care because no one knew exactly who was supposed to supervise him. What you did, when you delivered that sandwich, was to prevent him from suffering another day without support. But there's more." Harper opened a box of old files, filled with legal documents and private correspondence. He handed Michael a sealed letter. "This letter is from Richard Parker, written shortly before he passed away. In it, he leaves clear instructions about Ethan's custody and a family fund for his well-being. But, due to administrative errors and conflicts within the company, this fund was never activated. And that's where your action connects with everything." Michael opened the letter with trembling hands. The words were clear. Richard Parker had planned to ensure that his grandson had a dignified life, but only if someone cared for him, someone who showed compassion and responsibility. It was almost as if Michael's gesture had been the test that unlocked Ethan's right to that support. "Michael," Harper continued, "you unknowingly fulfilled the condition that Richard Parker implied, to show that Ethan had someone trustworthy. This means that, from now on, not only will you have the responsibility of taking care of the careful eating program, but you will also have a formal role in supporting Ethan's life, overseeing that he receives what is rightfully his." Michael felt a lump in his throat. Every detail made sense now. The gesture of compassion was not just a human act. It was a fundamental piece in a story that involved business, family, and delayed justice. He was faced with something that few could understand. His goodness had been recognized not only morally, but also legally and financially. "That's too much," Michael said, his voice breaking. "I just wanted to help a hungry child." "And you've done more than that," Harper replied. "You restored a connection that was lost. Also, I want you to know that this program will now have unlimited resources to ensure that no child in Springfield goes through what Ethan went through. You will lead all of this, and you will have total freedom to make decisions that benefit those who need it." Michael took a deep breath, trying to process the magnitude of the situation. He went from being an employee fired for diverting a sandwich to someone essential for a change that involved human lives, family legacy, and business integrity. It was surreal, but at the same time, completely human. "Michael," Harper said, now in a lighter tone, "you have turned a mistake, which no one else would see as positive, into something extraordinary. Never forget, compassion has real power. It changes lives." Michael left the mansion with a sense of deep renewal. He knew that not only had he saved Ethan that day, but he had also been the key to unlocking decades of neglect and carelessness. Every meal, every smile of a child benefiting from the program now had an even deeper meaning. The next day, Michael returned to the supermarket, but not as an ordinary employee. He was greeted with discreet applause from colleagues, some still incredulous about what had happened, but all respectful. His and Ethan's story quickly began to spread in Springfield, turning the program into a symbol of empathy and restored justice. As he organized yet another food delivery to vulnerable children, Michael realized something he had never felt before: the sense that small actions, seemingly insignificant gestures, could trigger extraordinary change, that transcended gratitude or recognition. He felt the true strength of humanity, the certainty that doing the right thing, even when no one is looking, is what creates lasting legacies. In the months following the big reveal, Michael Turner became a central figure in Springfield, not only as the person responsible for the Food with Care program, but also as someone capable of uniting the community around a greater goal: to ensure that no child goes hungry or is ignored. Each morning, Michael arrived early at Maplewood's store. Before starting any administrative activity, he went to the food stock, talked to volunteers and employees, and actively participated in deliveries. There was no gesture too small for him. Each meal distributed was an opportunity to strengthen bonds and teach values of empathy and responsibility. Meanwhile, Harper was closely watching the impact of the initiative. The supermarket chain began to receive praise from the local press, schools, and NGOs. But Harper also knew that success came with challenges. Some older employees remained skeptical about the program, fearing changes in routine or questioning the allocation of resources. Michael had to learn to deal with these internal tensions diplomatically, showing results and reinforcing that the program was not only a social initiative, but also a demonstration of human leadership that reflected positively on the company. One of Michael's first major tasks was to expand the program to other regions of the city. He organized meetings with school principals, community leaders, and volunteers, mapping areas with the greatest need. He discovered that some children lived through situations as delicate as Ethan Parker, but that no one had noticed before. The responsibility of ensuring adequate food for these children fell on his shoulders, and Michael embraced the mission with determination. Emily, his daughter, also became more involved. She created activities to teach children the importance of healthy eating, small gestures of empathy, and helping others. Laura, Michael's wife, supported her husband and daughter, helping with logistics and accompanying the families. The program began to become a true community effort, where each family member had an important role. Despite the success, there was no shortage of challenges. One afternoon, Michael received complaints from a regional manager, alleging that stocks were being damaged by the volume of food destined for the program. Michael had to meet with Harper to present detailed reports, demonstrating that the resources were used efficiently and that the social impact outweighed any logistical concerns. Harper supported Michael unconditionally, but stressed that he would need to continue balancing efficiency and compassion. As Michael grappled with these issues, he began to notice something even more important: the multiplier effect of his actions. Some children who benefited from the program began to get involved, helping peers or family members, sharing food, or encouraging others to participate. The network of solidarity that Michael had started expanded in unexpected ways, reinforcing the idea that a simple gesture can trigger lasting change. In parallel, Harper revealed to Michael that, due to the relevance of Ethan Parker's story and the impact of the program, the company was considering formalizing the project in all of the chain's stores in the United States. This meant that Michael would have the responsibility of overseeing the expansion, training teams, and ensuring that the program's philosophy, compassion, care, and action was maintained. Michael felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. The responsibility was now enormous, but he knew he couldn't back down. Every decision, every planning, and every visit to the children was critical to the success and integrity of the project. He also realized that the story wasn't just about Ethan Parker or himself, but about the ability to transform lives through small acts of kindness. One afternoon, while handing out meals at the Springfield Heights School, Michael was approached by one of the teachers, who told him about a girl named Clara, who was isolated and often skipped meals at home. Michael immediately included Clara in the program, reinforcing the idea that no child could be left behind. Each new family or child included in the program added to Michael's responsibility, but it also strengthened the conviction that he was doing something meaningful. While organizing the next steps of the program, Michael reflected on the entire journey up to that moment. Unfair dismissal, unexpected recognition, the connection with the Parker family, and the construction of a project capable of transforming lives. He realized that while there were challenges, resistance, and complexity, each difficulty served to cement the purpose of his mission, to help, protect, and inspire. And so, Springfield began to slowly change. Children had access to regular food, families felt supported, teachers recognized the difference in students' motivation and behavior. Michael Turner wasn't just an employee who delivered a sandwich. He had become an agent of transformation, showing that humanity and empathy can generate concrete and lasting results. But even with so much progress, Harper knew that the story still held secrets from the past that could emerge at any moment, requiring wisdom, patience, and courage from Michael. The bigger twist was yet to come, and the next few months would bring decisions that would not only cement the show's success, but also reveal hidden aspects of the Parker family and the company itself. With the Food with Care program consolidated in Springfield, Michael Turner began to deal with more complex situations. Expanding the project to other regions required planning, diplomacy, and quick decision-making, as each step could impact dozens of children and their families. On a Friday morning, while reviewing impact reports, Michael received an unexpected phone call from Harper. The billionaire's voice was serious but calm. "Michael, I need you to come to my office immediately. There's something you need to see before we move on to the next phase of the program." Intrigued, Michael headed to Harper's mansion. When he arrived, he found the billionaire with a pile of old documents, photos, and legal records. He began showing Michael correspondence that detailed Ethan Parker's life since birth. There were letters from Richard Parker, medical and financial records, and court documents that explained decisions made years earlier about the boy's custody and support. "Michael," Harper said, "Ethan never received all the support he was due for a series of failures and misunderstandings within the Parker family and our former business partnership. But now that you've come into his life, all of that can be fixed." Michael felt a chill down his spine. He realized that his initial action, delivering a simple sandwich, had set off a chain of events that now required full responsibility. Every decision he made could alter the future of Ethan and other children benefiting from the program. As they reviewed the documents, Harper revealed something Michael didn't yet know. There were other members of the Parker family, people who had not been contacted or who were distant, and who could challenge Ethan's right to the family trust established by Richard Parker. If this were to happen, it could jeopardize both the child's well-being and the credibility of the program. "Michael," Harper said, looking straight into the employee's eyes, "we need to tread carefully. It's not just about food and distribution. It's about protecting Ethan from decisions or disputes that could harm him, and you're the right person for it." Over the next few days, Michael began working with lawyers and social workers, arranging meetings with distant members of the Parker family and clarifying legal rights. He also began to closely monitor Ethan's life, ensuring that he received consistent care and emotional attention, as well as proper nutrition. While managing these responsibilities, Michael realized that the impact of the program was expanding in unexpected ways. Some children began to help classmates at home, sharing food and teaching healthy habits. Teachers noticed better school performance and increased self-esteem. Parents began to engage more in the community and support each other. However, it wasn't all good news. Michael found that some employees of the supermarket chain, still resistant to the changes, tried to undermine the program discreetly, questioning expenses and decisions. Michael had to use diplomacy, documented evidence, and concrete results to show that the program not only worked, but was essential to the company's image and the well-being of the community. The tension came to a head when one of the Parker family's lawyers suggested a formal meeting with all the family members, some of whom might challenge Ethan's rights. Michael realized that this moment would be decisive. Either they would guarantee Ethan's protection definitively, or he would risk reopening old disputes. Harper, confidently, said to Michael, "Remember, you're not alone. You showed character and compassion from day one. This meeting will be another test, and you have everything to come out of it successfully." At the meeting, Michael presented Ethan's detailed background, the acts of compassion that transformed his life, and the positive impact of the program. The narrative was convincing, based on documentary evidence, photos, legal records, and, above all, on the real life of the child and other beneficiaries. The Parker family's reaction was unanimous. They recognized that Ethan needed continued support and that the program led by Michael was the best way to ensure his well-being. They agreed to formalize the child's legal rights and proper supervision, ending decades of uncertainty and neglect. Michael left the meeting with a deep sense of accomplishment. He had faced complex challenges, dealt with family and administrative tensions, and yet managed to protect Ethan and consolidate the program. Every meal distributed, every gesture of empathy, and every careful decision had counted toward achieving that outcome. As he drove back to Maplewood, Michael realized something fundamental. The impact of his actions was far beyond what he could have imagined. The program not only ensured food for children in need, but also strengthened family bonds, brought justice to one child, and inspired the entire community to act humanely. And for the first time, Michael felt the true dimension of what it means to transform lives, a transformation that began with a simple gesture but was now cementing itself as an enduring legacy that could bring about concrete, permanent change. Summer in Springfield was coming to an end, and with it, Michael Turner felt that the city had changed. The Food with Care program was no longer just a social initiative. It was a symbol of empathy, responsibility, and transformation. The benefited children grew up in a safer environment, with adequate food, emotional support, and constant attention. Parents, teachers, and neighbors actively participated, creating a network of solidarity that extended throughout the community. Michael walked through the Maplewood School, watching Ethan Parker interact with other children. The boy had become more confident, smiling, and curious. Every gesture Michael had made since that first sandwich now seemed like a thread in a web that united past, present, and future invisibly but firmly. Harper met him in the schoolyard, smiling with satisfaction. "Michael, you've done more than I ever imagined," the billionaire said. Not only did it save Ethan, but it transformed the lives of hundreds of children. And it all started with a simple gesture. Michael smiled, feeling emotional. He knew that no financial recognition or title could measure the importance of what he had done. But in that moment, he realized that human impact was even more valuable than any material reward. Over the next few days, Michael focused on consolidating the program's expansion to other regions of the city and preparing detailed reports for Harper and the community. The feedback was unanimous. Lives were changing, families were being supported, and children were thriving. Meanwhile, Michael and Ethan's story gained local repercussions. Newspapers and radio stations told the story of the employee who had been fired for giving food to a hungry child and who, an hour later, had triggered changes that would transform lives. But, unlike many media stories, the highlight was not scandals or sensationalism. It was in humanity, empathy, and the concrete impact of simple actions. One day, while visiting the school, Michael received an unexpected letter. It belonged to a former supermarket employee who had doubted the program. He wrote, "I never thought that simple gestures could have so much power. You have shown me that compassion is more important than rules and protocols. Thank you for changing the way I see the world." Michael smiled, feeling that every hardship he faced, every criticism or resistance, had been worth it. He had transformed not only Ethan's life, but also other children, coworkers, and even people who would never have imagined they could be impacted. As she walked to the exit of the school, Harper approached with a discreet envelope. "Michael, I want you to read this privately," he said. Inside, there were legal documents officially finalizing Ethan's rights to the family trust left by Richard Parker, ensuring his financial security, education, and well-being. It was confirmation that, thanks to Michael's action, decades of neglect and inattention were being corrected. Michael took a deep breath. All the tension, the effort, and the dedication had culminated in that moment. He had not only helped a hungry child, he had restored justice, built trust, and left a human and lasting legacy. As he left school, watching Ethan play with friends, Michael felt a sense of peace and accomplishment. Every gesture of compassion, every decision made with care and courage, had added up to a transformative effect that was now consolidating before his eyes. And so, the story of an employee fired for giving food to a starving child ended in a surprising and satisfying way. With lives transformed, justice restored, a community strengthened, and the certainty that true goodness has real power. A simple sandwich not only changed Ethan's day, but set off a chain of events that united people, families, and an entire city around core human values. Michael Turner looked at Ethan and smiled. It was living proof that small gestures can generate extraordinary changes.